Welcome to my channel, INTJ Island. Today I'm going to discuss the Structured INTJ. The other day I read that Jean-Paul Sartre was sitting in a coffee shop revising his work, Being and Nothingness. A waitress casually walked over to his table and she looked down at his papers and asked if he would like to order anything. He said, "I'll have a cup of coffee with sugar, but no milk." The waitress replied with a smile, "I am so very sorry, but we are out of milk today. Would you settle for having it with no cream instead?" The philosophical structure of there being something concrete associated with the non-existence of that thing is a sticking point at times in debates about the existence or non-existence of a deity. To assert there are no unicorns, you should have some idea of what a unicorn would look like if it did exist. The difference between coffee with no milk and coffee with no cream could be significant, perhaps, if the idea of a container of milk were visualized as being averted by the drinker. However, given no information on what was being left out, and if the sweetened coffee were presented to him without request and unordained by any description, there would be no currently existing external influence upon how to make that distinction. He might still be visualizing coffee without milk, but that would be created from within, from past memories, but not by anything external. This allegorical story highlights the esoteric paths that philosophy can take at times. The human mind, especially the INTJ mind, wants to understand everything, but it is denied that satisfaction. And so, within the structure of our logical system of patterns, we end up with potential ways of looking at things which may or may not be helpful. For the INTJ, structure is critical. We use it in our patterns of understanding. We use it to tackle problems that we wish to solve. A methodology is more comfortable to our minds if it has a solid and well understood structure. As we learn new things, we naturally tend to use our intuition to place them into a structured pattern, and thereby enhance our understanding. Pattern structure supplies a foundation to use as a reference as we build our logical ideas, plans, and devices. Do you enjoy chess? I find it fascinating on many levels, including the way it is being used to further the advancement in artificial intelligence. But it also provides a good example of how structure will allow for incredible depth of understanding and freedom of intellectual application. This is at the heart of the pulsating, dynamic mind of the INTJ. Chess has a rigid structure in its rules. You may castle your king if and only if you have neither moved your king nor the rook, which is involved with the move. There can be no piece between your king and that rook when you castle. You can neither castle when you are in check, into check, or over a square between the king and rook, which is currently under attack, so that your king would be in check should it be on that square. This is often described as moving neither from, through, nor into check. However, only the king is considered on this point, because the rook can legally be under attack at the time of castling. Each piece type has its own unique motions and attack modes that only its type will match exactly. Chess has a playing board with 8 squares on a side that allows free motion within the 64 squares, but only within the clearly defined movement of the pieces. You therefore only need to consider things within the borders of the board. Nothing outside that area need be considered, and the legal moves of the pieces. As with life itself, this gives us a structure from within which we can calculate. The definitions of piece movement create constraints that allow for logic to be directly applied. There is a predefined goal that each player is given, to create a position on the board where upon the next move you will capture your opponent's king no matter what he does. At this point in the game, it is called checkmate. While the rules are rigid and form a precise structure for the players, the number of possible moves is myriad. This allows for an incredible amount of latitude for what is commonly described as art. Within this rigid structure, deep thinking can find a beautiful path to success, whereas shallow thought will usually be punished. Without the structure, it would be impossible to analyze to this depth and make logical moves. This arrangement is very similar to the way an INTJ approaches life. Structure opens the door to sound, logical, and deep thinking. In my last field service engineering job, I enjoyed problems that were new and challenging. However, my first step was always to contain the problem within its boundaries, limiting the possibilities to a subset of all possible failures for this device. This would create structure like the borders of a chessboard. I sought out the symptoms of what was working in the device and what was not working before I got into serious contemplation of the problem's cause. Let us say that the computer monitor mounted on the front panel of a large electronic device is blank, just as it would appear with no power applied. Of course, a list of possible failure mechanisms come to mind immediately. A failure inside the monitor itself, the on-off switch being set into the off position. The power plug could be disconnected, or power might not be applied to the power socket. But this could be a symptom of something larger than just the monitor itself. Perhaps the monitor is fine, but the problem could be touching far more things in the machine. So the first step is to see what else is wrong. Are the other parts of the machine powered up and operating? Structured thinking requires a logical flow. If I hear fans blowing and I see power indicator lights lit throughout the machine, with everything appearing to be operating normally, I will take a closer look at the monitor immediately. I will establish that it is plugged in and turned on. I can pop a meter into the socket and see if there is proper power applied. It could be a software problem, and cycling power might bring the monitor back up. When troubleshooting, it is a process of elimination. You cut the possibilities down to where there is only one remaining possible cause, and you then eliminate that cause, and the problem is fixed. Like Sherlock Holmes said, once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. It is fun to be on the hunt for a cause to a problem. And the INTJ's logical mind is a big help once you have the structure in place to engage your logic. We don't consider gremlins or fairies when we are troubleshooting. We only include natural causes, no matter how elusive they may appear. It would be counterproductive to waste time on eliminating curses or charms applied to the machine. Something natural failed, and it is up to us to find the natural cause using logic. One logical tool is the syllogism, and in a valid syllogism, you start with two propositions that are assumed to be valid statements, and they will lead to a forced valid conclusion. For example, all cats are mammals. Puff is a cat. Therefore, Puff is a mammal. This is logically valid, and the conclusion, therefore, will be correct if the premises are correct. We then only have to check the premises in order to establish this as fact. We start by properly defining what a mammal is, by using the description of requisite mammalian traits. A mammal is a warm-blooded vertebrate animal of a class that is distinguished by the possession of hair or fur, the secretion of milk by females for the nourishment of the young, and typically the birth of live young. We then check the definition of a cat, and find that a cat is a member of a family of mammals colloquially referred to as cats. A member of this family is also called a felid or a feline, and the term cat refers to both felids in general and specifically to domestic cats. Therefore, by definition, all cats are mammals. The second premise is easy to establish. Puff has the skeletal features of a cat and all the other attributes that all cats share. For additional data, you know what a cat looks like, and Puff looks and acts the way cats act. Also, your vet has validated your assessment that Puff is indeed a cat. Now that we have established to our satisfaction and to the satisfaction of any reasonable person that the two premises are true and therefore the conclusion must be true, Puff is indeed a mammal. Note that structure is required for the syllogism to work. Without structure of some kind, you can't ever establish the premises as being true. Structure is the foundation upon which you can build your logical edifice. For electronic troubleshooting, you begin with an understanding of what is normal for the machine. You know what lights should be lit and that there should never be smoke or water pouring out of the container structure. You eliminate the gross, big picture possible failures first and then work down to check the details in order to find something on the smaller scale that is not right. One other point about troubleshooting. As you become more and more experienced, you will have seen many problems before, and many times they are recurring problems. So you may start by checking known failure mechanisms immediately that match the symptoms, which will speed up the process considerably. However, Barring this exception, you will follow a structured logical method of arriving at the solution to your problem. For a given module, you know that it must have a set of inputs that must be correct. Things like power, cooling water, control signals, communication, and so on. You also know that if these inputs are correct, you must have a given set of outputs. Things like data signals, physical motion, control signals, etc. If all the inputs are good and one or more of the outputs are bad, you have a faulty module. At this point, it depends upon the module. You may be able to cycle power on the module and have it start working fine. There may be an overload that was tripped and you can reset it. Or you may simply swap the module out in its entirety. If the module is one that is repairable in situ, you can open it up and begin testing the subassemblies inside the module to find an internal failure. If so, once again, you look for a bad output from a subassembly that has good inputs. If you find a bad input, you follow that back up the line to its source. This is all based upon your knowledge of the structure of a known good system. Then you are able to set it up logically. Premise 1, if all input signals test good, all outputs should test good. Premise 2, all input signals do test good, and all outputs test good. Conclusion, the module is good. If, however, all input signals test good, but one or more outputs test bad, the conclusion is the module is not good, and therefore bad. But you are in a bind if you are troubleshooting equipment that you know nothing about. There's no way to know if things are as they should be or not. You can't say for sure if inputs or outputs are good or bad, because you don't know what they should be. Naturally, at this point, you must educate yourself in some way. A quick source of knowledge is to do something I am loath to do generally, ask for help. I will do it quickly if I must, but I will not do so eagerly. I always took a personal pride in fixing problems, which I must relinquish when I ask for help. However, I have a higher value that I aspire to, and that is getting the equipment back into service as quickly as I can. That comes first. So help is not refused when it is needed. If no experts are available for a quick fix, then comes the technical manual. I will dig into that and find what the machine is supposed to be doing so that I can spot what the symptoms are for sure. Then, I once again follow the logical steps that proceed from my newly acquired knowledge of how the equipment works. I ran into this far more often in the Navy because electronics technicians were called ETs, and we joked that it stood for everything techs. Sometimes I would find myself sitting on the deck in front of a piece of equipment I had never seen before, reading the tech manual on what it was supposed to do and how it did it. I was in effect building my structural pattern from which to proceed. Naturally, this has a broader application to life in general. For me, I don't look for magical and mythical creatures as causes to problems that I encounter. I assume that all problems have natural causes, and I build my structure accordingly for attacking and solving problems in life. I begin by gathering as much understanding as I can within the allotted time so that I can make a good assessment of the actual symptoms of the problem, and from there, I try to sort out the various possible causes and attempt to locate the one or more problems that I feel are at the heart of what I'm trying to fix. Sometimes this works perfectly, and sometimes I struggle a great deal. The better the structure I can create at the start, the more likely I am to be successful. I find that this need for structure bleeds over into other areas of life as well. I work best with a set time for going to bed and getting up in the morning. I tend to work best the first thing in the morning, and so I schedule my work for that time of day if at all possible. I have goals that I want to meet, and I'm not at all receptive to things that disrupt my schedule. I am not one who likes surprises. However, I can deal with even large inconveniences better than I can with small ones if I can plan for the former in advance, but not the latter. Logic may be king in my mind, but structure is the kingdom over which it rules. For every problem I face, I always aim to get my chessboard well defined in my mind, and the rules very clear for the current game I am working with. I look for a direct, logical way to approach my moves so that I can pursue my ultimate goal. I tend to be very short with anyone who attempts to introduce side issues or unrelated information as I am working on my structured steps. I want to reach the goal of completion so that I can enjoy my internal celebration for that event. I very much loved telling my customer, "Your machine is up and running and fully tested and ready for production." The more difficult the challenge I had at the start of the problem, the more I enjoyed reaching the completion point in the process. After the goal is reached and I am done, then I have time for distractions, but not before. Do you love structure in your life, or do you prefer flexibility and to live spontaneously? Are you at peace even when you are in the middle of a difficult task, as long as things are moving forward according to your chosen logical plan? Are you, like myself, hit by frustration when your logical plans are overcome by events? How do you react? If you'd be so kind, please let me know in the comments. If you like this video, please click like, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. I'll see you next time.